And we'd like to welcome in a very special guest from the DMV region, new athletic director, and head boys basketball coach at National Christian Academy. Kenny Johnston is joining us. Coach Johnston, congratulations on your new position and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Obviously, it's been an interesting last few months in general in the sports world. And of course, in the DMV, things have been radically different the last couple months, but hopefully slowly returning to some semblance of some normalcy coming up. But before we talk about your program and your new team, I just wanted to get your thoughts on your background a little bit for people that aren't familiar. You've had some great stops along the way at the collegiate level at some national powers like Townsend and Louisville and Indiana. And for our Pennsylvania residents, of course, they're very familiar with LaSalle and the Explorers program. So could you talk a little bit about your background, first of all?
Yeah, so like you said, mentioned programs that are near and dear to my heart. I've had the opportunity to work with a ton of great men and support staff. And so I'm a 1999 graduate of the University of Maryland. So I have a little bit of a non-traditional background. My degree is in cell molecular biology and genetics. So while I was working for a biotechnology company by day, I was a high school coach by night in the DMV area. And through relationships, I was fortunate enough after, I guess, about a 10 or 11 year stint as a high school basketball coach to have the opportunity to go to college. So Towson was my first start with Pat Scarry. And, from that point, I was able to move a little bit in the collegiate ranks.
It's obviously been an interesting last 6, 7 months for everybody, but at your school in particular, there was kind of an unusual situation with openings coming up for both the football and the basketball program, and then you coming in to take over basketball and also becoming the athletic director. Can you take us through the process of those few months, how you heard about the opening and how
Yeah,
everything developed?
yeah, it was interesting. I was after leaving LaSalle and moving back to the DMV area because we're from the DMV. So I looked at it as an opportunity, especially with the pandemic, for my kids to be able to come home and be closer to family and spend time with their cousins and their grandparents and do some things we haven't been able to do, especially since we had gone to the Midwest. And I was going to enjoy being a dad, to be honest with you. I was going to be able to go around, when they were able to play and train them and get on their nerves and watch them play basketball. And I identified two situations that I felt like were great for my kids. My younger son was going to go to Paul VI with head coach Glenn Farello, someone that I worked with for years and like a brother to me. And my older son, I thought would be best served at a National Christian Academy because of the culture of the school and the academics that they had, their structure. And I was familiar with Coach Trevor Brown, over the years. I know that he worked really hard. He kept his guys in the gym for development purposes. So I just felt like, I identified two grade levels. We had gone through the process of having my older son, Amari, be accepted to National Christian, and he was prepared to start. I had met the principal. He had my phone number. We had a cordial relationship. And then all of a sudden, Coach Brown called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to Rock Creek Christian." And I said, "Okay." So, best laid plans, 2020, you have a plan of action, and then you have to make some adjustments. So in the midst of me during that day thinking about what the adjustments would be, I got a phone call from the principal. And he asked me to come in, and he presented the opportunity to me to become the athletic director as well as the head coach. And I told him that, I was honored and I would consider it. I needed to go pray on it and talk to my family about it. And after, I guess, 2 or 3 days, my conclusion was that, I believe my purpose in life, beyond all others, is service.
Mhm.
I believe that my calling in life is to help others achieve at the highest levels. And, in these uncertain times, I started thinking about the seniors that were out there that were almost, they're just so, their immediate collegiate futures were uncertain. I looked at National Christian. I actually grew up literally walking distance. Probably took me 7 minutes from the house I lived in from the age of 5 to 18 to get to National Christian walking. So I long looked at that program as kind of a potential to be a national power in the athletic world, coupled with a great academic tradition. And my competitive nature mixed with what I felt like my calling kind of kicked in. The opportunity to coach my son for a year and officially get on his nerves. He thought I was getting on his nerves before in workouts, but to really officially get on his nerves as his coach. And then it was a challenge because Coach Brown's a great coach, and he had the opportunity. The players that were here, the vast majority of them went with him to Rock Creek Christian. So it was a bear cupboard. We're talking September the 2nd or 3rd or whatever that was, and school is about to begin or has begun in a lot of places, and you have to go out and try to identify young men who need a home. Honestly. So we've been able to handpick individuals who coming in and want to try to establish a new culture. I've been joking a lot of times. I think we finally surpassed it, where I felt like we had a 1-to-1 coach to player ratio.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had so many coaches, so many great men who wanted to volunteer their times and wanted to be a part of building a program here in the DMV area. That's kind of kind of like a little unique niche. And so, we've been able to establish ourselves, and I think we're hitting the ground running.
Yep. Well, you mentioned when you talked about your background that you had experience at the college level, at the high school level. You've coached some AAU basketball. That has to be a tremendous advantage to your program and to the kids to have that experience at the level above, at other levels for high school, and a background in addition to coaching at a high school previously. Could you talk a little bit about the benefits and what are some of the things you learned and some of the differences that you learned as a coach when you're at the collegiate level versus the high school level, and how do you prepare then for your kids to play at the next level then?
Yeah, I used to joke at when I was coaching in college with some of my younger colleagues, my graduate assistants, some of the younger assistant coaches, and they would ask me, what do I believe has helped me to be successful? And my joke would be, but I think it's a lot of truth to it, honestly, is that I worked harder recruiting for Team Takeover, AAU program, and Paul VI, which is a Catholic school in the WCAC here, in a highly competitive area. I had to work harder recruiting kids to those programs than I had to in college, because there are no phone call limitations. And there's so many more roster spots potentially, and you're not dealing with scholarships per se. You're dealing with just different situations with each families. So if you want to call it practice, or I gained in so much confidence helping to build Paul VI. When we took over Paul VI, we were the 10th best team out of 12 in the WCAC. The year I left, they were, and I may have been holding them back, but they were undefeated in the WCAC in the regular season and competing for a championship. But we took a good 6 years to build that program, to get it established. And it was just a joy to watch that program build. And if I have any strengths in coaching, I think it's the ability to have perspective and the ability to form genuine relationships. So I think that has translated across every single level in every single situation. In recruiting, you're not going to get everyone that you would like to get. I think it's more important that you focus on landing the right people and the right families. And the right family is really when the mix is there, when the perspective of the program is met, as well as the perspective of the individual family and kid. You have to understand what their goals are, and you have to have a platform to be able to deliver, on that potential of that individual player. And then the genuine relationships. I'm not going to be successful as a coach if people don't believe in me. If I don't understand, what makes that young man tick, as I'm trying to help them transition from young man into full-blown manhood. And the relationships I've been able to establish with the AAU programs, although I'm competing with them, when I was an AAU coach, I spent a lot of time working with all the AAU programs in the general area and then ultimately around the country. When I was a high school coach on my high school time, if I don't have a relationship with DeMatha, Gonzaga, O'Connell, all the great high schools in the area, then they're not so apt to want to send their players to play for me in the summertime. So it has to be a balance between competitiveness and actual genuine desire to help families, kids, individuals maximize their goals. And I think that translated for me when I went to college, because everyone knew that I was, at the end of the day, whether my school was the best fit for the young man or not, I was going to be a fan of that young man's process, and I'm going to try to treat everyone as though they were my own kids, and just try to help situate and place people, where they need to be their most successful.
Yeah. You mentioned, I remember the word you used was competing with the AAU, and it's interesting around the country. There's some regions in which they work together, the high schools and the AAU programs, they work together. And then there's others in which there's quite a bit of the divisiveness and literally competing and some other not nice things going on in terms of trying to work with players. And,
Right.
One coach will say the complete opposite and, tell them to ignore what you've learned instead of cooperating together and trying to build kids up. Could you talk a little bit about the benefits of being in both, or how important it is to work with each other for the betterment of kids?
Yeah, and it's funny because I didn't know much about AAU at all. I'm coaching at Eleanor Roosevelt High School after I'm out of college and working with Glenn Farello. And I'm wondering why, we're winning, we're competing for championships, we're good every year. The players that we were coaching weren't necessarily being recruited at the highest levels. Glenn had Delonte West, Eddie Betts, and Alpha Ben-Gur, Delonte Holland, all individuals who had put on NBA jerseys, come out of his public high school, which was literally 5 minutes from the University of Maryland. And not one of those players had an offer from Maryland or Georgetown. And then I'm looking at some of the guys that we had on our team, and I thought, they were qualified enough to be considered for some college. And it was just a struggle, it was pulling teeth. So I met with Keith Stevens, and he invited me to come out and check out the AAU program. We were known as Triple Threat at the time. And so I started working with him, really just trying to dive into that world and find out what it is about AAU that's allowing the kids to be recruited. But not the high school programs, no matter how much they would win. And what I found is, especially, and it really clicked for me once I became a college coach, AAU's number one benefit from a recruiting standpoint, just from the recruiting we're just talking about, their job essentially is to scoop all of the quote unquote better players into like a little pot. Okay, so from a general area, and then you go and play, in weekends where college coaches shouldn't have distractions with their team or their other visits on campus, and they can just go out and evaluate players. So if they think that they're geographically in a situation where they can recruit the DC area, the DMV, as a college coach, and they go and watch the quote unquote better programs from that area, they would expect that the better programs are going to have some of the better players from that general area. Now, we all know that players can come from anywhere and play for anybody. They don't necessarily have to play for a shoe company team. But I would say, in general, the vast majority of the better players play for shoe company teams. And so as a college coach, I'm going to go check out those players first. And I know that I may have, if I go watch individual high school as a college coach, I have one day out of a week to go out recruiting, and I go watch one specific player at one specific high school, and there's 12 other coaches there. Well, now I have a 1 in 12 shot to land that recruit for my time to be used, in a constructive way. If I go watch an AAU tournament to see this one individual player, and there's 12 coaches there, with that individual player, I have a 1 in 12 shot. But I also may see 3 or 4 other players that pique my interest. So now I feel like, okay, well, I've evaluated this player. I've seen them compete against some other guys that I may like, and I have 4 other players I can now put on my list, on my radar. to potentially go see. And what happens is, from the flip side of it, from a high school perspective, that one player who was out playing on that AAU program, if the coaches like him playing on the AAU team, now they have to follow them back to their high schools,
Yep.
right, to recruit them. So now when you follow them back to their high schools, now you're kind of forced to watch everybody else is in the gym. And now all of a sudden, some players who may not be playing on an elite AAU team are still being evaluated by collegiate coaches. And now maybe the buzz or the interest starts to get out there. So I think that's kind of how it should work in a hand-in-hand scenario, is that the better players get the exposure. They can then in turn kind of shine a light on the rest of the players or their school in general. And it should be a seamless transition with, with everyone operating at different levels. I mean, there's so many schools. There's Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA, junior college. There's a ton of young men who want to play basketball, but there's also a ton of opportunities.
You mentioned just some of the great names that have come out of the DMV, and I realize all the viewing areas that get Sports Talk, they can say, well, we're very proud of our region, and we have some really good kids and some great programs and some wonderful traditions. But in the DMV, you truly have some of the elite in the country and sometimes around the world, with players playing at the next level and playing in the NBA. I think it takes a little extra to coach and to kind of maneuver in the DMV, which you have that experience doing. Can you talk about that high level that you have to play at it and what players have to bring to the table when you're competing, especially as you said, you want to get National Christian Academy competing against those other national powers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the talent here is unbelievable. And that's one of the things, like when I was in deliberation about taking the position, it kind of inspired me to really kind of jump in and service some of the young men that I feel like are undervalued in the area. The WCAC does a great job with their conference, the public schools here, the IAC conferences, some of the other independent schools. I mean, there's talent at each place, but there's always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that probably could be playing at a higher level or getting more respect, honestly, on a national level. And what they ultimately end up doing, a lot of them, is they leave the area to go to some of the other great institutions around the country, whether it be IMG or Mount Verdi or Oak Hill. And I want to establish something, honestly, that where families don't feel like they have to send their children away if they're kind of following a non-traditional high school path, as well as building up a program, a grassroots infrastructure, because National Christian is a K through 12 high school, where a lot of the top middle school players in the county or the DMV area actually attend National Christian or have attended National Christian early in life, and then they, for one reason or another, have transferred away. So I would like to establish a grassroots foundation for homegrown talent as well. But the story I like to tell a lot of people about how talented the DMV area is, when I first got my first taste of AAU basketball, we were known as Triple Threat. We were clearly the third best team in DC at best, because there was DC Assault with Adidas, there was the DC Blue Devils, who had a Nike contract. Both of them had been around for decades, fully sponsored programs, and we were winning a lot of games. We were competitive. We weren't on the shoot circuit. We were wearing our Reebok reversible jerseys and our Nike shoes, and we were going to tournaments and trying to figure out, how we were going to afford to eat while we were there. So our first year we had a young man, Victor Oladipo. So obviously everyone knows Victor's story. He ends up being the number 2 overall draft pick coming out of Indiana. Well, his 9th grade year, we had 15 players on our 15 and under team. Okay, he had played JV at DeMatha, and he was clearly, he won't like to hear it, but he was clearly the 10th best player out of 15, right, during that year. So if you go back to the pecking order, the DC Blue Devils with the Kevin Durant's of the world and everyone, the DC Blue Devils were going to get 10 of the best players out of DC for their 15 and under. DC Assault was going to get 10 of the best players out of DC for their 15 and under. And then we had 10 players better than Victor on our team, or 9 players better. So he was at best the 30th best freshman in the DC area, as far as talent, like tangible talent. Now, projection,
Have you brought that up to him since?
I have. We talk about it all the time. Even when I was coaching him in Indiana, it was something that we looked at. I mean, there's no pressure. You weren't supposed to be here. Yeah. I used to always joke with him. I said, you weren't a McDonald's All-American. You weren't even a Burger King All-American. But the thing is, now that you've worked so hard that, we'd be getting ready to go play against Gary Harris or at Michigan State or, Trey Burke in Michigan. I say, well, those guys that you wish that you had the recognition of, same recognition as they did in high school, well, they're right there in front of you on the court. And I think that's what the DMV does. It's so competitive night in and night out that when players have to learn how to play with other good players, right? So that's what helps the players in the DMV translate to college. So I think a lot of places, the young men are around the country, they're playing and they're really talented. So there's no knock on their talent, but they're used to being the guy.
Yep.
So it's a little bit different when you're going to college, where you're going to play with 12 other guys who were the guy when they were in college. Whereas in the DMV, you take someone like a Jameer Young, okay, who was a complimentary piece at the Matha, was not a high volume shooter, but he was a year-round winner. He came off the bench and won with Takeover. They were an undefeated team. They won championships. He played at the Matha. What some games he was capable of going for double digits. Most games he probably was under double digits. But he goes to college, and now he's thrust into being a focal point, right, at Charlotte. Yeah. And he's freshman of the year and leading the team in scoring, getting triple doubles because he knows how to function on a team. He kind of sacrificed his own individual scoring and abilities to a certain degree to be able to function, but learn how to be a part of a winning program. And I think that's what the young men in the DC area learn more than anything, is just how to function, being a part of something that's bigger than themselves.
How big of a challenge is that? Because I've heard a lot of players and coaches relating that you're the big fish in a small pond, and then you move up to the next level and you're just one of the guys. You go from being a featured player, whatever the sport is, you go from a featured player to having to coexist and be unselfish and share the ball and trust your teammates, when a lot of times you were the ones that was depended on. How big of a challenge is that for some young people to get used to? And have any advice for parents or for coaches in trying to help kids handle that adjustment?
Yeah, and it's a balancing act. Honestly, it really is, because people, and I tell my players all the time, and I even told the players when I was recruiting them in college, I'm coming to recruit you for a specific reason. If you didn't display talent, then I'm probably not here talking to you. I'm coming to offer you room, book, board, and tuition, because I'm hoping that you're going to help us win games, at our level. We're not coming here out of charity, essentially. So they have to have a tangible skill set, and they have to be marketed properly to draw attention. So their abilities and their ability to display, their opportunity to display their ability is vitally important. But at the same time, at each level that they rise up, they have to understand that, if you take it to the highest level and work backwards. The NBA, and I think that's the goal of a lot of young people, obviously, is, that league is a stars and role players league. There's very few people that are going to be able to take more than 5 dribbles in a possession. James Harden makes it look, look fun. Steph Curry may make it look fun, but there's very few of those in the NBA. There's a lot more Danny Green stand in the corner, shoot a 3. PJ Tucker stand in the corner, shoot a 3. Clint Capella, screen, roll, catch a lob. There's a lot more role players than there are stars. And in the NBA, or use Dame Lillard as an example. If Dame Lillard didn't come into the NBA and become known as Logo Dame. If he had been doing that as a rookie, he probably would have been out the league, Dame. he had to prove himself and validate himself as somebody that was invaluable. So that's all the hustle plays. That's getting the loose balls, that's taking charges, that's being a great assist guy, that's guarding your position. And then you create a way to make yourself invaluable such that the coach realizes that I can't have this. When this person is off the court, my team does not function the same way. So I need this person on the court to help my team function, because they are getting the loose balls, they're making the right pass, they're bouncing the floor, they're taking charges. They're making, they're creating shots for their teammates. They're being unselfish. So they need them on the court. And then when you're on the court, you can't score from the bench. So once you're on the court and you're gaining minutes, then all of a sudden you get a little bit more freedom, take a couple more shots, to get into a rhythm. And then ultimately you have ultimate freedom, where all the hard work that you're putting in the dark comes into light, and you're shooting shots from the logo like Dame. But I think, it's just a matter of understanding that it's important to function when you're selecting a school. You want to know, do they want me or do they need me? And that's a big difference between those two things. Wanting somebody, if you're talented and you're displaying it, I think everyone in the country should want you. That doesn't necessarily mean that they need you based off of what you plan on doing. If you're the type of player that feels like you need to shoot the ball 10, 12, 15 times a game, then you probably don't want to go to Duke or, North Carolina or Kentucky, unless you are that guy who's capable of doing that. You want to go to an appropriate level that's going to allow you to play that game. If you're someone who just wants to play a role and be a part of a winning team and eventually will develop into A, B, C, or D, then, those situations may be fine, or something based on that level. Just scale it down to whatever level you're being recruited at, and identify the type of program that fits what you do as a player.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we talk to athletes all the time that they get all excited about going to a particular program, and then 6 months or a year later, they're coming back and they're thinking of transferring, or they're not happy. I'm sure with every player it's a little bit different in what you look for and your priorities when you look at going to the next level. But what are some of the things that you found is helpful for kids in terms of matching the structure? You want to kind of balance playing time with coaching style, with your own style. Are there benefits sometimes to maybe going to a coach that has a different style to just kind of broaden your own skill set?
Yeah, potentially. I think the first thing that I try to tell players is you want to pick a school in a situation where, if the worst happens, the unfortunate happens, knock on wood, you have an injury and you're out for 3-6 months, and you're looking around and you're saying, you know what, even without sports, I'm happy that I'm here. Am I comfortable in this situation, in this environment, matriculating as a student, first and foremost, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of these young men are not going to become NBA players or possibly even overseas players. But once their collegiate day is over, they're going to have to be a professional in one sense or the other. And I think that's the key to is that they need to understand they're being prepared to be self-sufficient young men, young women in life, hopefully, and be able to, have grown wisdom and be able to pass it along to others. So, I want to address your question specifically. Give me that last part that you asked me.
About sometimes, and I know a lot of times it's parent influence too, as far as where you go to the next level. But, how much is it a value of trying to find a school and a coach that matches your skill set, as opposed to finding a coach that might be able to do a little bit more or stretch your ability a little bit more, so that, if there's anyone that does want to go play in Europe or even in the NBA, you want to have that broader skill set?
Yeah, I think matching is important. I feel like That doesn't necessarily mean that if you are someone, let's say you've played on the interior your whole life, but you feel like, I really would like to be able to do more on the perimeter, because if I'm going to maximize my skill set, I need to be able to play the three. And that's a common thing. I'm playing the five in high school, I'm playing the four in high school, but I believe that I'm a three. I'm just the biggest person at my school. College coaches, believe it or not, can see through and understand when somebody is playing quote unquote out of position at one level, and how that's going to translate to the next level. So I think that's a common misconception that parents and players have, is that they have to be able to show this or show that. Just if you have the skill set to do it, it shows up. Kevin Durant, I'm sure, has been the tallest person probably in the majority of the teams he's played on, but no one's going to make him play the five because he can handle the basketball. He can show it in practice. He can shoot. Coaches have this funny thing. They like to win games. So whatever that player can do to help them win games, that's usually what they're going to allow that player to do.
Have you ever met one that didn't?
Oh, I haven't. And it's ironic. It's like me. As much as I say, "Oh, I'm coming here to help the kids," and I love the kids, somehow when that game starts,
Sure.
I start thinking of ways to figure out how to win that basketball game. And I always tell people that players are made between, and it's something I learned. I mean, players are made between, let's just use the collegiate timeline, between April and September. Teams are built between October and March. So whatever you want to be as a player, this is your time to identify that. You have to figure out between April, you leave out one way, you come back another way. And coaches have a funny way of adjusting their thought process of who you are as a player based on what they see.
Sure.
People grow, people develop. Anthony Davis was simply a shot blocker. When he was 6'1", he had guard skills, but he wasn't necessarily an interior rim protector. He gets to be 6'11", and now he's blocking shots. Well, now you're a rim protector, but your guard skills have kind of gone away. Then his body catches up with him, and now he's able to do a little bit of everything. So I feel like players need to, and families, they need to say, well, what is this coach known for? Is this coach known for developing his players? Or is this coach known for just recruiting good players? Mm-hmm. Is this coach because more than likely, there's very few coaches in America that are going to change their system based on an individual talent. If you go to UVA, you're going to play defense. You're going to hedge ball screens hard. You're going to front the post. You're going to double the post. You're going to set screens if you're a 4 and 5 in a blocker mover situation, as they call it. And if you can shoot, you can occasionally pop out and shoot threes. If you go to Villanova and you're a 4, you better be able to play on the perimeter. You better be able to potentially pick and pop, but you're going to have to make threes from the corners, from the slots, from different areas. You're going to have to put the ball on the ground and create opportunities for your teammates. There are certain styles that aren't going to change based on personnel because the coaches have won for so long, and the proof is in the pudding. Can they help you be better at certain things? Absolutely. If you go to Villanova, you're going to learn to dribble the basketball. You're going to learn to shoot the basketball. If you go to Purdue, you're going to be a post player that's going to learn to be physical. You're going to learn to pick and pop per se, but you're not going to put the ball on the deck as much. So it's really about evaluating the programs before and not getting so caught up in the glitz and the glamour, like you say, the calls, the names, the attention. Just watch them.
Yeah,
they're not going to change. They are who they are. They're successful for a reason. They're making millions of dollars by doing it this way. You're going to fit their system. They may make slight adjustments based on personnel, but trust me, trust and believe, they want to win their way because their culture that they've established has been successful.
Yeah. We were kind of joking around winning isn't important, or winning, how important winning is for head coaches. But, I think that's almost like a catch-22, because you want to establish your own style. You want to kind of be stubborn. And I think more so nowadays, you have to have a little flexibility if you don't have success. I mean, you mentioned Villanova. If a kid complains or says, I don't like the style, Jay Wright has to just point to the banners up on the roof and
Right.
or up on the ceiling and say, hey, I think I know what I'm doing here. But for younger coaches that are just starting out, you're trying to instill your own way of thinking. But I know there has to be a lot of pressure from kids and more so from parents, especially the high school level, to try to build success, have your own style, and yet accommodate other people's style.
Yeah. There's no shortcut to success though. So you have to have non-negotiables, as you're establishing your culture. And I talk to my assistant coaches, my volunteers who have been so gracious to come and help me. And we talk about who we're identifying, and there's just certain things that we're trying to pick out. Tangible skill sets. Obviously, we want to have players that can shoot, pass, and dribble. Okay, people that have that type of skill set. But beyond that, honestly, we want to recruit year-round winners. We want to recruit people that we feel like have intelligence upside. And by that I mean people who value the academic side of life. Someone now, do grades and standardized tests necessarily reflect intelligence? I mean, that's debatable. But you want to identify players who are committed to achieving in the classroom, because that shows their true competitiveness. And I believe people who have intelligence upside they never really have a ceiling. Like, you can always add to their game. You can always challenge them mentally with something new, as they get better. And then you want to have people that are accountable, young men that are accountable to someone. We can't, in college, I would always say, all right, so if this player is running his own show at home, and kind of free flowing, and he's been operating this way for 18 years, what makes me think that in 2 months, I'm going to all of a sudden become his mentor that he's going to listen to and be focused on. You want to have them have a fear. If I call home, I want that player, because then things happen, they're young men, but if I call home, I want them to regret having to have someone know that they did A, B, C, or D. So you want to have players that are accountable to somebody. And, in building a program, there's just certain things that you emphasize that fit your culture. You truly are just establishing your culture. And talent, everybody in America, the better the players that you have on the court, the better the coach. I have this beautiful system that I like to run, and we can run we can run a ball screen on the left, the right, or the middle. We can come down, we can kick the ball come off and draw to help and kick it to the corner. Well, if the shot's missed out of the corner, we're probably going to lose that game. When they make those shots, I get to walk
genius.
around. Yeah, I get to walk around and smile and say, "Oh, look how good my offense is working." So it's really, for me, everything starts with defense. So if I'm going to build a program, I'm going to probably err on finding people who are dedicated to ball pressure, defense, help side, communicating, taking charges, getting loose balls. Well, that may not necessarily be the person who can score 30 points, in a particular game. They may look at it and say, well, coach, I like to score the basketball, so this is what I value. And so we probably won't be a good fit. So I don't blame if I, as a coach, select that player who I know, who has shown me that they are a great scorer, but they're not interested in defense. But I'm telling all of my players and my parents that my program is built around a culture of defense, then who's at fault? Yep. Is it the player or is it the coach? So, you have to be true to yourself. You can't, as a coach, always go after the low-hanging fruit, trying to skip steps, because you can't skip steps on the way to success. You have to establish an identity and build. And especially new coaches, new programs, the vast majority of them are going to places that haven't been successful. Very few people get the opportunity to go to an established winner and with a stocked cupboard and just take off and running. Most people are going to a place where they have to build, or the coach has been fired for a reason, or the coach has left abruptly. And there's some semblance of chaos, in the situation. So, you're going to a place where you have to establish and build, your building blocks. So you're really going to have to be true to yourself, and make it cool to be there. I always say, like, when we first got to Paul VI, it was not cool to be at Paul VI. Mm. And now I look at it, I laugh at kids all the time, and I say, "Hey, have you heard of Paul VI?" "Oh yeah." And it makes me smile because I remember me and Glenn Farrell talk about all the time. We remember who we had to coach in the beginning. Great young men, not necessarily the most talented. So, but now it's cool to go. What makes it cool to go to Paul VI? The fact that you're winning, the fact that they want to be a part of a winning program. Well, how do you win? You have to build the program up step by step. And so that's my goal. I tell the players all the time, like, how good will we be during the middle of a pandemic at National Christian Academy this year? Who knows? But they'll be able to look back on it in pride 5, 6, 7 years from now and realize that it was this class that established a new culture at National Christian Academy. It was this class who started the process of making it cool to be at National Christian Academy.
Could you talk a little bit about your program? As you said earlier, through no fault of your own, a lot of players left with the coach, former coach leaving. But I know you have one big name that I'm aware of, Mr. Freeman, who had some experience at DeMatha, who people I'm sure in the DMV know all about, if not beyond his ability. So talk about any returning players and some of your newcomers as well.
Yeah, it's been funny in my because I wasn't in the DMV area. So I kind of had a unique experience. I came home and, I wasn't as familiar with the players that were here. Well, to my liking, to my knowledge base, having, identifying all the guys. So I was going around and, even though the pandemic is here, every once in a while they're doing these one-off events in certain gyms. So I kind of got out and was seeing players and just watching them purely from a fan standpoint. And I was able to see a lot of these guys that ultimately ended up coming to the program before I was even thinking about coaching high school basketball. And I was making calls to different colleges, for some of these players. But Brayon being one, he was huge for the program because he's a young man that's focused and driven. Like you said, he's already committed to George Washington. He had name recognition. A lot of people would like to play with Brayon because of the success and the talent that he has. And, Brayon has a great personality. He's lively, he's fun, he's playful, and I'm this serious, grumpy coach. So it's great for, it's a great mix for us, me preparing him for what he has to expect, behind door number 2 when he goes to college, and he's going to be helpful for us leading our young guys. And from there, we were able to, Ahmad Harrison from Baltimore. He plays for Team Thrill, great defensive player, I believe a high major guard. So those two form a great backcourt. Jonathan Ismith, another senior, who I feel like he's at the very least a mid-major Division I basketball player. He was at National Christian. He decided to stay. He was one player who decided to stay with us. 6'9", very athletic. Clarence came down from Baltimore, Team Thrill, another senior, another mid-major Division I basketball player. So those guys are going to lead us, that senior group. And then, we've been able to identify, kind of really dive into what is near and dear to my heart, balance out the roster with young men that are a little bit unknown, a tad bit underdeveloped, need the opportunity and the platform to perform freely, and they've been doing a great job. Like, I've been really impressed with how hard they've been working. When we've been able to get into the gym, National Christian hasn't been able to play, but they've been able to go and play as, with some of their club teams or forming a club team and get out there. And they've had a great measure of success kind of forming and putting things together. There's a young man, Juan Bell, who came from Paint Branch. My son, Amari Johnson, Takeo Carpenter, Isaiah Coleman, Amari Friday. So Paul Mason, I don't want to forget any of them in case they see it, they'll get all sad. But these guys, honestly, they aren't household names because of how hard they work and how they kind of fit the culture of what I'm trying to establish. And I told them my expectations are simply this: I have one goal, and it's objective, but I want to be known as the toughest, hardest playing high school basketball program in the country. So I think that's something that we can control. We can lead the country in toughness. We can lead the country in getting loose balls. We can lead the country in taking charges. I can't make a goal and say, all right, we're going to make more 3-pointers, or we're going to be the highest scoring team, or we're going to be, the highest field goal, because we can't control when the ball is going in the basket all the time. But we can control our effort every single night out. And, that's what and if we accomplish that, that translates to winning. So I don't really have to put a goal on winning. I want everyone who comes through the doors to leave with one form of a scholarship or another.
Yeah.
So
how do you look at scheduling? I know because you were hired so close to the start of the school year, or really just after the school year started, you didn't have a whole lot of input as far as scheduling. But how do you kind of map out scheduling? Because obviously, if you want the program to get to that national level, you want to schedule tough opponents, but you don't want to just go out and get hammered by 50 points every night. So going forward, kind of what's your philosophy about scheduling?
Yeah, so for me, it's I told the players coming to the door, I'll play anybody, anywhere, honestly. And I feel like challenging them in that way is what brings the excitement. Because it's a pandemic going on, honestly, a lot of people haven't done their schedules because no one knows what's going to happen next, from day to day, week to week, especially. And so getting to month, no one has any idea. Like, I've been fielding more phone calls these last few weeks just because people kind of can see where we may be able to do some things in January and February. So scheduling honestly shouldn't be a problem locally. It's going to be the games out of the area that'll be, kind of called into question until we can kind of figure out what's going to be happening here in the next month or so. But being that we're an independent school, we can play anybody, anywhere, any circumstance, just a matter of travel and getting there. And so I still expect us to, and that's the beauty of the DMV, we're going to have so many competitive games just here, potentially, even if we can't play against WCAC teams, just all the other independent leagues that are out there and independent teams, we can get a very competitive schedule with them. And then hopefully we can get a couple national level teams on our schedule to kind of put ourselves out there. And with the players that I have, I mean, no one's going to feel sorry for us. While they may not be quote unquote household names to a lot of people nationally, the people in the know, whether it be the high school coaches or the AU coaches, they looked at our roster and they've told us that, they know how good we are. I honestly feel like, all due respect to everybody that's in the DMV area and the great teams, I feel like we've established a top 5 team just with this group now. How quickly we mesh together and how we function, and if we want to play defense the way I want us to play defense, which we're going to play defense that way because I'm not going to allow us not to. I feel like we're going to be competitive in each and every situation.
Could you talk about your role as an athletic director? Obviously, it's your first couple months as the athletic director, and these are unprecedented times that you're dealing with. So talk a little bit about that role, and are you going to get any help over the winter? Because you're going to be going probably in 2 different directions as a head coach of a prominent team and as the school's AD.
Yeah, and it's definitely a unique challenge. It's something that goes into my desire to be a part of building. I love the idea of being able to build and establish and put my footprint on something. And we have great leadership at National Christian Academy, the principal, Bruce Hasty, and all of the people that support and help the church be established. So we're it's a unique situation because during COVID, the number one priority is safety. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure that your kids are safe. And I understand, what do people hear what they need to hear. If you're age 15 to 18, you look at the TV and it says you're not affected as much by COVID, even if you do catch it. So they're a little bit looser. But what they don't realize is that they can be asymptomatic and they could take a virus back to someone who is going to be negatively or potentially drastically affected by the virus. So you have to slow them down and not allow them to just kind of be free like they want to be, because they were thinking, oh, well, I'm not affected. I can go, they're playing basketball over here. Why can't we go play over there? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? So in establishing the program, it's looking at things in its entirety. We have a great girls program. They were top 3 in the country a couple years back, and Coach Henry Anglin does a phenomenal job with them, known universally as a great development coach. So I inherited him, which is huge to have some continuity on the girls' side of things. And, me and him have done a good job, I think, of establishing a quick relationship and kind of working seamlessly. And he shares my philosophy of being a development coach. So I think that's going to be a great and easy transition, working with him. And he really functions independently. And our football program is much more complicated, because while I can go out and go grab 10 players and put some jerseys on and say, hey, look, your program's here. Football is a lot different. So, and with 0 football players returning, identifying someone who wanted to take on the challenge of building a football program from scratch. We interviewed several people, and it's just so fortunate to find Torrey Honeycutt. He's someone who has great experience at all different levels of high school football. His sons are playing college football, and he's an independent businessman who kind of shares my philosophy on building from the ground up, and not skipping any steps, and being willing to start young and develop and come up, realizing that you're not going to just go and grab a team of 20 seniors and try to say, all right, we're playing football. You want to get freshmen in, sophomores in, create a schedule that fits their strength level, because football is a dangerous game if you're not physically ready for the combat. So you're not necessarily going to be playing varsity football season 1. You need to be, you need to structure your team and build your team up in taking the proper steps. So he's been great, going through the process. He has a great staff that's connected with the youth here, the youth programs here in the DMV area, and we're expecting great things with him. But once again, everything is kind of, to a certain degree, on hold, because you want to just make sure that you're not moving too fast. As coaches, you can kind of be like parents and kids, honestly. Sometimes you can want things to happen, snap of a finger when you want them. So it's really about following the proper protocols, making sure that we're COVID safe in everything that we're doing, building and having communications, Zoom calls, finding different ways to connect with kids and families and communities, social media. Those are the things that we've been kind of focusing on, getting the word out and developing the programs.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question because we are in uncharted territories, but what's it going to be like for, first of all, having football in the spring? What it's going to feel weird for me, and I'm hoping we have that dilemma. I'm hoping we don't get to March or whatever, and there's still limitations and we can't have that. But could you talk a little bit about the schedule for 2021 for your sports programs, and what do you think the spring season is going to be like, the extended spring season?
Yeah, for us, we don't anticipate having football games in the spring, but we are going to try to start spring practice. We feel like we'd be doing them a disservice without having had the ability for them to train and work out and develop, and having the bodies necessarily due to enrollment to be out there. But we're going to be functioning in preparation. It's almost like getting a jump start on spring training for the following year, and being prepared to roll out a product in the fall. For basketball, obviously, the girls program is going to kind of follow our same timeline and start the workouts in earnest here soon, and then official practice middle of December, and then getting towards preparing for the season, however many games we're allowed to play.
And before we let you go, you mentioned your son is at the school. Are there any rules in place as far as how you're going to be dealing? Sometimes coaches and players, they agree not to talk about sports when you're at home. I know one coach in particular, the wife sends him upstairs and the husband goes downstairs. The boys go upstairs. Are there any family rules you'll have?
Oh yeah, there definitely will be a cooling off period.
Yep.
Here, here and there when necessary. And I tell the fortunate part for me is that so many people that are on my staff are familiar with my son. So either whether I've coached them or not, Ray Brewer, as an example, is my associate head coach, one of the premier development coaches in the area for guards. But I coach Ray in high school. So when I'm coaching Ray in high school, my son is 5 years old. So they have their own relationship. And that's just an example. Like there's one of my best friends since I was fourth grade is on our staff. So I'm telling them, you coach him. You talk to him. I'm not talking to that kid. That kid over there. So, because I can't imagine how difficult it must be to have your dad as a coach. I'm yelling at you about taking the trash out and cleaning the bathrooms and making your bed and also holding your follow through and why don't you rotate over? It's like you can never escape my voice. And like I tell him, I'm never going to shut up. The day I'm quiet, I don't have a purpose, especially as a coach. And I've only got a few more years with you in the house. So I'm trying to make sure that I can come to your house and not catch bed bugs. So I got to make sure you keep your house clean. So I'm going to be on them, but I'm not going to be on them in a way that I'm not going to be on anybody else. It's equal opportunity, with my teams. It just so happens that he happens to live with me. So.
Well, Coach, thanks so much for your time. Congratulations on both of the new positions at National Christian Academy. We're going to be looking forward to the Eagles. Hopefully, the season will be starting as close to normal as possible, but we know there'll be great things coming from your program and all the athletics with National Christian Academy.
Thank you so much once again for having me. You stay safe and good luck tomorrow with the voting.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
And we'll be back with more of tonight's Sports Talk show coming your way in just one moment.